A millionaire, while visiting one of his stores, is shocked to witness one of his employees humiliating and disrespecting his black daughter. But then he takes this action. Michael grew up in a humble environment, helping his father at a small toy store. From an early age, he learned the value of hard work and perseverance in the face of difficulties. When he lost his father at the age of 18, he took control of the store, facing challenges with courage and determination. Over the years, he transformed the small family business into an empire, diversifying his operations into various sectors and gaining the respect and admiration of many. During the early years of expanding his stores, Michael met Elizabeth, a determined and kind young woman who shared his vision of life. They married shortly thereafter, building a solid foundation for the family they were creating. The birth of Linda, their only daughter, brought a new dimension to Michael's life. While work and the growth of his business had once been his sole focus, now protecting and securing a bright future for Linda became his main motivation. Over the years, Michael learned to balance the expansion of his companies with family life, but always making it clear that Linda was his greatest pride. For him, nothing was more important than caring for his daughter and ensuring her happiness. Michael and his family were gathered around the dining table, enjoying the lunch prepared by Elizabeth. It was a simple meal, but filled with conversation and laughter, a moment Michael cherished as a breath of fresh air in his busy routine. Linda, who was stirring her juice with a spoon, looked at her father and said, "Dad, I was thinking of going downtown after lunch to buy some clothes. I need to update my wardrobe," she said with a shy smile. Michael, lifting his eyes from his plate, replied, "Sure, sweetheart. Do you want me to take you there?" "Yes, please. It makes things so much easier. That way I don't need to take a taxi or walk," she responded excitedly. Elizabeth, clearing the empty plates from the table, joked, "Don't forget to be back before dinner, okay? I've seen these trips downtown turn into an entire afternoon of shopping." Linda giggled. "I promise I'll be quick, Mom." As Elizabeth took the dishes to the kitchen, Linda went upstairs to get ready. Michael, in the meantime, grabbed the folded newspaper from the sofa and began reading the headlines of the day. He was absorbed in an article about the local economy when the phone vibrated on the coffee table. He picked it up, saw that it was his secretary, and answered. "Good afternoon, Mr. Michael," began the secretary, always in her formal tone. "I have some documents here at the store that need your review and signature. They're for the expansion project we discussed last week." Michael adjusted his tone to signal that he was paying attention. "I see. I'm taking Linda downtown in a few minutes. After that, I'll stop by to sign. Is that okay?" "Perfect, Mr. Michael. I'll be here waiting," she replied before hanging up. A little later, Linda came downstairs, already ready. She was wearing a light dress and carrying a small handbag. Michael watched her with a discreet smile, put the newspaper away, and grabbed the car keys. "Ready, Princess," he said. "Yes, are we going?" she replied, excited. The two left the house and got into the car. On the way to the downtown area, they talked about trivial things, like what Linda intended to buy and a few recent events Michael had mentioned reading about in the newspaper. Soon after, they arrived downtown. Michael parked in front of one of the busy squares and, turning to Linda, said, "Have fun and buy what you need, but don't forget to call me when you're done so I can pick you up." "Thanks, Dad. Don't worry. I'll let you know," she responded, getting out of the car and waving before disappearing into the crowd. Michael stood watching his daughter for a few moments, then drove to the store where his secretary was waiting. As soon as he entered, he greeted the staff and headed straight for the secretary's office, where a pile of documents awaited him on the desk. "These are the most urgent," she said, handing over a stack of papers. "They're related to the expansion, and there are also some invoices that need to be reviewed." Michael sat down, carefully examined each page, and signed where necessary. After finishing, he handed the documents back to the secretary. "Is there anything else that needs my attention right now?" he asked, while adjusting the newly signed documents on the desk. The secretary hesitated for a moment, as though deciding whether she should mention something. Then, with a smile, she said, "Actually, Mr. Michael, there is something that might interest you. Have you visited the luxury clothing store downtown after its renovation?" Michael tilted his head, intrigued. "Luxury clothing store? Which one?" "One of yours, of course," she replied, laughing lightly. "The one that's part of your franchise network on the main street. The renovation was completed a few weeks ago, and I hear it looks stunning. The team even made sure to send photos, but nothing compares to seeing it in person." Michael frowned for a moment, trying to remember. "Ah, yes. Now I remember. I approved the budget for that renovation earlier this year, but with so many things happening, I didn't keep track of the final details. You're saying it's worth checking out?" "No doubt, Mr. Michael. It's getting a lot of praise from customers and staff. They mentioned that the new modern design is attracting even more buyers," the secretary said, her tone mixing professionalism and enthusiasm. Michael paused for a moment, thinking, "Well, since I'm downtown, I guess I'll stop by. I want to see the result of the work and maybe talk to the team. I'm sure they'll love the surprise visit," she replied, organizing the documents into a neat pile. "If you need anything else, I'll be here." Michael stood up, adjusted his suit, and thanked her. "Thanks for reminding me. I'll head over there now, and congratulations on the excellent work with these documents. You're always on point." With a discreet smile, he said goodbye to the secretary and left the room. As he walked toward his car, he felt the lightness of being out of his routine of meetings and heavy decisions. He enjoyed making unexpected visits to the stores, something he'd kept doing since the beginning of his career, because he believed direct contact with the business was key to success. In the car, Michael drove through the busy downtown streets. As he approached the store, he saw the newly renovated facade, impressive and sophisticated, standing out among the other establishments. He parked the car and spent a few seconds admiring the exterior. "Let's see if the investment was worth it," he murmured to himself, before getting out of the car and walking toward the entrance. Michael entered the luxury clothing store with firm steps, admiring the new design and decor that highlighted the elegance and refinement of the space. He walked calmly, analyzing each detail. Worth every penny of the investment, he thought with a satisfied smile on his face. That was the feeling he wanted customers to experience when they entered his stores: luxury, exclusivity, and comfort. As he walked through the space, movement at the back of the store caught his attention. He squinted and saw someone familiar. It was Linda, holding some clothes in her arms, walking toward one of the attendants. Michael was surprised by the coincidence. His daughter had chosen that very store to buy clothes without even knowing it was his. He paused for a moment, watching her from a distance before deciding to follow her. As he began to approach, he noticed something was wrong. The attendant's tone was harsh, very different from the cordiality he expected from his staff. He slowed his steps to listen more carefully, and that's when Linda's voice cut through the air, filled with indignation. "What do you mean, people like me? What exactly are you trying to say?" Linda said, holding a silk dress firmly. The attendant, a young man with impeccable appearance and an arrogant posture, responded with a cynical smile. "Don't get me wrong, miss, but some pieces are made for a more specific audience. I think you should consider something more suited to your profile." Linda raised her eyebrows, incredulous. "Profile? What profile? What exactly are you implying?" He shrugged, crossing his arms. "Look, certain pieces require a presence, natural elegance. No point in forcing it. I'm just trying to save you time. Are you saying I'm not good enough to buy a dress in this store?" she asked, her voice rising with anger. "This is discrimination, and you know it." Discrimination, he said with a sarcastic laugh. Ah, don't start with that. It's always the same thing. You people come, complain, make a scene. You know what that's going to change? Nothing. Linda took a step forward, furious. You think you can talk to me and others like this just because you're wearing a suit? I'm going to report you. This is unacceptable. Report? He replied with a dismissive look. Do whatever you want. People like you only know how to shout and complain. Then you leave, and life goes on. Meanwhile, I'll still be here doing my job. Linda clenched the dress she was holding as though it could contain her anger. You have no right to speak to me like that. I won't accept being treated this way. The attendant shook his head, not even bothering to hide his impatience. Accept it or not, it doesn't change anything. It's not personal, understand? I'm just being honest. This store was made for another type of customer. Michael, who had been listening to the conversation with clenched fists, felt his indignation grow with every word. He couldn't hold back any longer. Taking 2 firm steps forward, his voice rang out across the room. Enough! He said, loud enough for both to turn at the same time. He pointed at the attendant, his eyes burning with anger. This young woman is my daughter, and you will treat her with the respect she deserves. I've heard more than I should have. The attendant stood frozen for a moment, clearly not expecting to be confronted. Your daughter? He muttered, trying to regain his composure. Yes, my daughter, Michael said, now closer. And who do you think you are, speaking to her or any customer like that? Linda, surprised to see her father there, touched his arm, trying to calm him down. Dad, let it go. He's not worth it. Michael looked at her, his features still tense. No, Linda. He needs to learn that this isn't acceptable. This is no way to treat anyone, especially you. The attendant, not realizing the gravity of the situation, took a step back, but still wore a look of disdain. With all due respect, sir, I was just trying to be honest with the customer. Some people need to understand that certain clothes aren't suitable for them. Michael narrowed his eyes, his patience running thin. Are you hearing what you're saying? You're implying that my daughter isn't good enough to shop here? What kind of behavior is that? The attendant crossed his arms, maintaining his arrogant posture. Sir, I treat all customers the same. I'm just trying to save them time on choices that, in the end, may not be appropriate. I'm just being sincere, and not everyone appreciates that. Linda took a step forward, still holding her father's arm, but staring the attendant down directly. Sincere? You were prejudiced. You spoke to me like I didn't have the right to be here. Do you really think I'll let this go? The attendant raised an eyebrow, unfazed. Accept it or not, miss, it doesn't change anything. Things are the way they are. Not everyone fits the profile this store is looking for. It's simple. Michael took a step toward the man, his presence now more imposing. Who decides the profile of this store isn't you, and certainly not based on prejudice. What you did was wrong, and I won't tolerate it. With all due respect, sir, the attendant said, almost provocatively, I'm just following the store's standards. If the customer didn't like it, maybe she should look for another place where she feels more comfortable. Linda opened her mouth to retort, but Michael raised his hand, indicating that he would speak. His voice came out firm, filled with authority. You clearly don't understand. This young lady is my daughter, and what you just did is disgraceful. If this is what you call following standards, then those standards are wrong. The attendant gave an ironic smile, still not understanding the seriousness of the situation. Well, if she's your daughter, sir, maybe you should teach her not to make such a scene. Often, certain criticisms are constructive. Linda, enraged, squeezed her father's arm again. Dad, please, let's go. This man isn't worth another word. Michael hesitated, his eyes still fixed on the attendant, as if evaluating the best way to handle the situation. Finally, he sighed deeply, trying to control his anger. You're right, Linda. He's not worth our time. Let's get out of here." The two began to walk away, but just before they reached the door, the attendant muttered loudly enough for them to hear, "That's right. Run home. That's what people do when someone puts them in their place." Michael stopped instantly, his shoulders tense, but Linda pulled him firmly. "Dad, please, it's not worth it." He looked at her, saw the urgency in her eyes, and reluctantly nodded. "All right, sweetheart, let's go." In the car, the silence was heavy as Michael drove through the busy streets. After a few minutes, he broke the silence, his voice still full of indignation. "Now, tell me exactly what happened in there from the beginning." Linda sighed, still processing what had happened. "It was exactly what you saw, Dad. I just wanted to buy some clothes. I picked out a few pieces and went to ask for help from that man. From the start, he looked at me weird, like I shouldn't even be there. Then he started saying that certain clothes weren't for people like me, implying I wasn't good enough to wear them." Michael gripped the steering wheel tightly, his face rigid with anger. That man shouldn't even be working in a store, let alone talking to any customer like that. He's a problem, and this won't stand. Linda looked at him, confused. "Dad, he's just a prejudiced attendant. Are you really going to make such a big deal out of this?" "Yes, I am," Michael replied without hesitation. "And it's not just because of you. It's for everyone who's ever been treated like this. And the most infuriating part of all, that store is mine." Linda stared at him, surprised. "What? That store is yours?" "Yes," he said, eyes focused on the road. "It's one of my franchises. I renovated it recently, invested in creating a luxury and comfort environment. And this is what happens. An employee disrespects customers. This won't continue." Linda crossed her arms, still processing. "I had no idea you had a store like that. Never imagined it was yours." Michael sighed, trying to calm down. "I work hard to build something everyone can enjoy. But if there's one thing I won't tolerate, it's disrespect. And what he did was unacceptable." Linda looked at him, her expression still heavy, but now with a hint of admiration. "Dad, thanks for defending me. I was so mad in there, but also scared. I didn't know what to do." Michael relaxed his shoulders a bit, glancing at her before turning his attention back to the road. "You never have to deal with something like this alone, Linda. Not while I'm here. And I guarantee that attendant won't treat anyone like that again." Linda nodded, still surprised by her dad's intensity but grateful. She knew he would do whatever it took to fix the situation, and for the first time, she felt the full weight of what it meant to be Michael's daughter. Michael parked the car in the garage at home, but didn't turn off the engine. He turned to Linda, who was looking at him with concern. "Sweetheart, get out. I'm going to fix this now," he said, his tone firm and determined. Linda hesitated for a moment, but nodded. "All right, Dad. Do what you need to. Just don't let anger take over, please." Michael gave a small nod, almost like a silent promise, and watched his daughter leave the car. As soon as she entered the house, he backed out and drove away, his eyes focused on the road, determined to fix what had happened. Arriving at the store where he had been earlier, Michael entered in a hurry. His secretary, seeing him walk through the door with a serious expression, immediately stood up, surprised. "Mr. Michael, I didn't expect you back so soon. Is something wrong?" Michael stopped in front of her desk, taking a deep breath before answering. "Something unacceptable happened. I need you to call the manager of the luxury store downtown. I want him here now, in my office." The secretary's eyes widened. "The manager, sir? Of course, I'll do that immediately. It may take him a few minutes, depending on traffic." "That's fine. Tell him it's urgent. I'll wait in my office," he said, before turning and entering his office. Michael sat in the chair behind the desk, his mind replaying the scene at the store, the attendant's words echoing as a reminder of the prejudice he had personally faced so many times in his life. It frustrated him, but it also strengthened him. He knew he had to act. A few minutes later, there was a knock on the door, and the secretary entered, accompanied by a middle-aged man wearing a well-fitted suit. He seemed confident, but upon noticing Michael's serious expression, his demeanor changed to apprehension. "Mr. Michael, this is William, the manager of the luxury store." "William, Mr. Michael would like to speak with you," the secretary said before leaving, closing the door behind her. "Please have a seat," Michael said, motioning to the chair in front of the desk. William sat down, looking at Michael with curiosity and concern. "I hope it's nothing serious, Mr. Michael." Michael leaned slightly forward, his eyes fixed on the manager. "Serious is an understatement. I want to know what kind of training you've been giving your attendants, William." William furrowed his brow. "Training? Sir, we have a clear customer service protocol. I can assure you we follow standards of respect and courtesy." "Respect and courtesy," Michael repeated, his voice laced with irony. "Today, in your store, my daughter was humiliated and discriminated against by one of your attendants. He treated her as if she had no right to be there. He made offensive insinuations about her and had the audacity to ignore her complaints." William's eyes widened in shock. "Your daughter, Mr. Michael, I had no idea. This is unacceptable. I can assure you that I never instructed any attendant to act like that." "Then explain to me," Michael continued, his voice growing harsher, "where did he get the idea that the store has standards that justify this kind of behavior? Did this come from you or someone on your team?" William shook his head vehemently. "Not at all, sir. Our training is clear. We treat all customers equally and with respect, no matter who they are. There's absolutely nothing in our protocols that allows for discrimination." Michael paused for a moment, studying the manager's expression. Finally, he spoke. "Well, I hope you're telling the truth, because I'm going to hold you accountable. From now on, I want you to reinforce the training with your team. Everyone must understand that prejudice of any kind will not be tolerated in my stores." William nodded quickly. "Of course, sir. I'll personally make sure of that." "Good," Michael said, sitting up straighter in his chair. "Now I need you to go back to the store and bring that attendant here to speak with me. I want to handle this directly with him." "Understood, sir," William replied, standing up. "Should I inform him about the reason for his visit?" "No," Michael replied firmly. "I want him to come without knowing what awaits him." William nodded again. "I'll arrange that immediately." The two exchanged a quick handshake, and William left the room. A few hours later, there was another knock on the door. The secretary entered with the attendant, who seemed confident as he walked in, but froze when he saw Michael sitting behind the desk. His expression shifted to pure shock. "Mr. Michael, this is the attendant you requested," the secretary said, before leaving and closing the door. Michael gestured to the chair in front of him with a nod. "Sit down." The attendant, now visibly nervous, obeyed. As soon as he sat down, he began to justify himself, his words coming out hurriedly. "Sir, I want to apologize if I did anything wrong. Maybe there was a misunderstanding." "Silence," Michael interrupted, his voice as firm as steel. "I don't want to hear apologies now. I want you to listen." The attendant stood still, his face pale. "Today, you humiliated a customer. Not just any customer, but my daughter. You treated her with prejudice, made offensive insinuations, and had the audacity to ignore her complaints. This is unacceptable." "I didn't know she was your daughter, sir," the attendant tried to say, but Michael cut him off again. "It doesn't matter." Michael raised his voice, slamming his hand on the desk. "You shouldn't have treated her like that, or anyone else. The fact that she's my daughter only makes this more personal for me." The attendant tried to speak again, but Michael raised his hand. "I've heard enough. You're fired. Effective immediately." Additionally, I'm going to sue you for discrimination and humiliation. I want you to leave my office now." The attendant stood up slowly, his head lowered, and left without saying a word. His expression was one of complete defeat. A few minutes later, the secretary entered. "Mr. Michael, do you need anything else?" "Yes," he replied firmly. "Start the process to fire the attendant and prepare the documents to sue him for discrimination and humiliation. I want this handled as quickly as possible." "Understood, sir," she said, leaving the room to carry out the orders. When Michael arrived home, Linda and Elizabeth were in the living room waiting for him. As soon as they saw him enter, Elizabeth stood up. "Michael, Linda told me everything. What did you do?" Michael sat down on the couch, sighing. "I talked to the manager, made it clear that this won't happen again in my stores. Then I had the attendant brought in. He's been fired and will be sued for discrimination." Linda looked at her father, impressed. "You really did all that?" "I did, and I'd do it again," he replied firmly. "No one has the right to treat someone like that. And I'll make sure this never happens again, not with you or anyone else." Elizabeth put her hand on her husband's shoulder, proud. "You did the right thing, Michael." Linda smiled, emotional. "Thank you, Dad, for everything." Michael hugged her, feeling that despite the tumultuous day, he had done what was necessary to protect those he loved most and the values he held dear. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, give it a like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. See you in the next story.